This is part 2. If you haven't checked out part 1, it's probably a smart idea to start there, as the episode covered the original trilogy and Phantom Menace. Moving on. I want to see Star Wars like George Lucas for a second. Hear me out. I want to look at the prequels through that old Flash Gordon, everything is campy serialized lens, the pastiche he was going for from the 1977 jump. Hey, just for shoots and ladders, what if we made Attack of the Clones actually look like a sci-fi serial? Okay, yeah, that makes a lot more sense to me now. Mentioned time and time again, the original trilogy's reliance on the serials of the 1930s and 40s, a subject that really isn't brought up all that often anymore, and it really wasn't mentioned that much at all around Force Awakens, and not in modern conversations, but that doesn't mean they aren't still there. Camp has always been integral to the DNA of Star Wars, which I think a lot of people kind of resent. Imagine the original trilogy of the 1970s of Star Wars, and imagine the campy, stilted character interactions of the prequels are the 1930s science serials. At first I figured there was no way George did that on purpose, but there is this quote from George himself from myth making behind the scenes with Attack of the Clones. Their dialogue in the couch scene is very corny, it is played to the hilt, but it is consistent with the overall Star Wars style. Most people don't understand the style of Star Wars. Ouch, George! Words hurt, bud! He goes on to say they don't get that there is an underlying motif that is very much like a 1930s or Saturday morning serial. And I think that puts a lot of purpose on George creating the prequels in the way he did, at the camp level they're at. And one of the implications from that is that the original trilogy would have been just as campy. Look no further than some of the original names and concept art from it, but that the collaborators that George had along the way moved it to what our idea of Star Wars is. Star Wars was an accident, which is a pretty complex way to start a conversation, so let's do it! Public opinion on Attack of the Clones was affected by the release of The Phantom Menace, which meant there was a lot of trepidation about the quality of this particular film. Would we get something a little less rickety this time, or would we be lulled by flashy visuals and empty promises? Jar Jar Binks was basically a pariah by the time Clones came out. I hate to open with this quote for about 50 reasons, but Harry Knowles, formerly of Ain't It Cool News, said, "This is the most intelligently plotted of the Star Wars films." And Empire magazine was pretty up on it, saying matters greatly improve in the final 40 minutes. Christopher Lee's Count Dooku arrives to provide some much needed gravitas. C-3PO turns up to do his C-3PO thing, and Padme puts on a skin-tight white leotard. Oh my god, Empire magazine. 2002 was not super woke. Rolling Stone and Peter Travers were a bit lukewarm on it, but Peter does later add, Anakin traumatized by the murder of his mother and capable of killing innocents, that reminds us of the dark power Star Wars exerted before it became a franchise. Traumatized by the murder that prefaced his absolute massacre of men, women, and children. I have a lot of opinions about episode 2. Going back to the Ebert well for a moment, he was exactly middling on it in his 2 out of 4 star review. Episode 2, Attack of the Clones, is a technological exercise that lacks juice and delight. The title is more appropriate than it should be. Got him! Though critics were on the whole pretty nice, putting up reviews that were cagey and a bit safe, on the whole, they realized by this point they sort of overstepped themselves on Phantom Menace, so the reviews are positive but sure to point out that they disagreed with decisions that the film made, but mostly positive. Like UK's The Sun, who said, "It's easily as good as The Empire Strikes Back and better than the original." I'd say it all kind of lands really in that range. It's a bunch of ideas thrown at the screen, and it's fun to watch all the goofy-ass CGI even if it hasn't aged super hot. But back then it was okay for the most part, and for every critic compliment on this film, they tend to hedge the bet with something they didn't love. They're just a little more safe than they were on Phantom, because I think that bit them all a little. Like how Clones was right at the birth of digital projection, so some reviews just spent half the piece talking about how much they hated digital projection. But I think the cautious optimism thing translated over to the public at large. Adjusted for inflation, it's the lowest grossing Star Wars movie in North America. Which isn't saying an awful lot considering that the worldview on Phantom Menace when this came out was reaching what I consider one of the lowest points of its public acceptance. The audience was pretty in line with the critics on this one. A lot of people were happier with this than Phantom and really enjoyed the big ending fight sequence with 48 million lightsabers in it. In a way, you could say the least profitable thing about Star Wars is people not having much of an opinion on it at all. It made all the right references, allusions, and callouts it was supposed to satisfy an audience. Also, this shot right here is dope forever. Honestly, at first, a lot of the audience was just happy it added up to more than Phantom Menace, and at the end of the film, the Empire was created and the visuals are neat now, but they were knockouts then. I remember I went to Chili's after the movie. Please sponsor my show, Chili's. And all of my film friends and I talked about how cool it was that this really felt like a Star Wars film. Because it gave us all those feelings again, regardless of how this film has aged. Clones was loved briefly.
I don't like sand.
I printed out 27 pages of comments from a forum dating back to 2005 with people reacting in real time after they got back from the theater from seeing Revenge of the Sith.
Easy! We're in a bit of a situation here.
This is the hardcorest of the hardcore fans, and the very first post from Stormcloud8, my initial reaction was depression. I was afraid to post my review because I thought I hated the movie, but I realized I was only depressed because the movie was depressing. And there are a lot of I thought I hated it, but it turned out I loved it reads on this, like a lot. Fast forward 2 paragraphs of hedging. Once I got over my initial confusion, I realized what a masterpiece it was. My appreciation of it has grown by the day. User Lexi. My first reaction was, oh my god, this is so huge. I love this, but now I only feel depressed, sad, and exhausted. I love going to the movies! Qui-Gon Jinn 83. Fantastic ending to the saga Ghost Jedi. I brought a Snapple bottle with me to drink during the film. I only had one half of it as I did not want to take my eyes off the screen.
Sunday, bring a half-empty Snapple bottle to the theater because you're only gonna need the bottom half.
I have 27 pages of this, and it's all super positive. But let's dip into the movie criticism. The Guardian. Revenge of the Sith has some almost decent things. Cinema Blend had a different take, one we've seen before. Revenge of the Sith isn't just a great Star Wars movie, it's a flat-out great film. The New York Times, Revenge of the Sith ranks with The Empire Strikes Back as the richest, most challenging movie in the cycle. We really gotta stop comparing things to Empire, friends, or at least have an understanding of how people felt about Empire upon its release. Critics are again effusively happy to at least be on board. Their positive reviews and more than ever the emotional range of the critics and the audience are fairly in the same range, if not colored by the exhaustion of the inescapable marketing barrage that had assailed us for 6 straight years leading up to this. Back to the fan side of things, one particular no had some people giving up on Star Wars for good. It was a challenging ending that people accepted, but I mean that as an average. They both loved and hated it so much that it aggregates down to, yeah, it's fine. People that enjoyed the first 2 prequels seem to unanimously love this. In those 27 pages of real-time reactions, I can't even tell you how many people were speaking openly about their depression after seeing it. It was powerful for them seeing this world of 1930s serials come crashing down in a hail of blaster fire. The metaphor come alive, the death of 1930s camp. And I think there's a case to be made that the fracturing of sides in Star Wars really started here. Critics on the whole didn't have anywhere near the kind of connection to the material on this one that the fans seemed to have, but the range of their reads on this were mostly in line. So when they have to stand on their own filmmaking, like dialogue for example, a thing Lucas has admitted many times isn't his strong suit. The gulf between critic and audience continues to widen, especially when everyone is still scratching their heads a little bit.
I can't hold it any longer.
I mean, every reaction to Revenge of the Sith happened. People hated it, people loved it, people were like, okay. And that's really where we still are. Fast forward 7 years. After about 9 years of being told repeatedly there was no new trilogy for episodes 7 through 9, a rumor that appears to have been the plan from Lucas once upon a time, surprise, he sold the franchise to the House of the Mouse for $4 billion, aka 4 Justin Timberlakes. Which was met immediately with a wall of excitement, and then the reality of the decision started to sink in. J.J. Mystery Box Abrams was announced as the director of Episode 7, tipping Disney's hand a bit. In the wake of Star Trek Into Darkness, a film that the Mystery Box thing did not service and actively hurt the word of mouth of to retain the mystery. Can we reserve the word mystery for things that actually need solving? Fast forward 3 more years to 2015. I've said before that I appreciate that all involved didn't really try that. Here, it's no secret that I love The Force Awakens. I mean, it's my most popular video ever, but I understand the climate leading up to this was confusing, to say the least. It was uncertain, and for good reason. In a lot of ways, that defines the current age of Star Wars. The critics eat them up like Star Crunches, but the audience, well, the Star Wars audience continues to fracture in increasingly toxic ways. Star Wars and Star Wars camp are very much a reflection of the times they were made. So what did the critics and Geena Davis have to say? Well, Geena Davis loved it. At the premiere, she let out a whoop from an overlooking balcony as the credits rolled, later going on to say, "I love everything about it, especially Rey." And Geena Davis knows a thing or two about action stars, and I just thought that was delightful enough to share. Okay, good. Robbie Collins of The Telegraph, J.J. Abrams' film sets out to shake Star Wars from its slumber and reconnect the series with its much pined-for past. That it achieves this both immediately and joyously is perhaps the single greatest relief of the movie-going year. High praise. Manila Dargis of the New York Times, Mr. Abrams may be as worshipful as any Star Wars obsessive, but in The Force Awakens he's made a movie that goes for old-fashioned escapism, even as it presents a futuristic vision of the pluralistic world that his audience already lives in. He hasn't made a film for true believers, he has made a film for everyone. On the slightly lukewarmier side of things, Justin Chang, writing for Variety, said, "Risking heresy, it's worth noting that Abrams actually did smarter, more inventive work on his 2009 reboot of Star Trek. Though I'm not sure I totally agree with the premise of his thought. I mean, you can just like them both without comparing them, or we could celebrate that one dude somehow managed to succeed at the same impossible task twice in a row. He brought Star Trek and Star Wars back into the mainstream. I'm way less interested in comparing the results and way more interested in acknowledging that one person did both things. That's remarkable." And just so every film can get this award, The Atlantic's Ta-Nehisi Coates said, "A decent Star Wars film and arguably the best Star Wars film since Empire. Always gotta compare it to Empire. Here's the ranking. It goes number 1, Empire. And then everything else is tied for second." Did I get it right? Todd McCarthy of The Hollywood Reporter, "As the best Star Wars anything, film, TV show, video game, what have you, in at least 32 years, The Force Awakens pumps new energy and life into a hallowed franchise in a new way that both resurrects old pleasures in promising new directions." And on the flip side, there was some controversy upon release about some of the more socially conscious casting decisions in the film, though it didn't really appear to have affected the bottom line, as The Force Awakens is the 3rd highest grossing film of all time, pulling at a cool $2.068 billion. It was critically loved, and whatever noise existed around the film dissipated with little upheaval. There was a lot of nervous excitement leading up to release, which I think ultimately worked in its favor because it had enough exciting moments, things that made you feel. And I think for a moment, many of us were just kind of glad to have it back. It made safe decisions very well. And if you want to hear more thoughts on this, I did do a whole episode on it, including its perceived proximity to A New Hope, which I think is its strongest asset. And moving on to a film where the decisions cannot be called safe in anywhere near the same way. I imagine a lot of you are waiting for me to get here. I'm not going to pull up any blurbs this time. We're just going to talk about the elephant in the room, the blowback. I mean, yeah, throw out the fringier stuff like petitions to strike the film from canon, because loving a film series to the point you have ownership of it is not, at least in the United States, a right protected and guaranteed by our Constitution. We don't own it. I have, however, talked to many wise and intelligent friends and colleagues that I respect who felt absolutely betrayed by this film. And I get why, because The Last Jedi, with all the credit to Rian Johnson in the world, is a challenging, aggravating film, which is 100% by design, because by the end of it we're left floating in the middle of the ocean with no paddle and no idea where this goes from here. You know, a serialized form of entertainment where every episode ends with us wanting to see the next one, only it's not the 1930s anymore, and in the 2010 serials you get punched in the face like Breaking Bad, which Rian Johnson directed the 3 best episodes of. It's still Flash Gordon, he just happens to have taken a dive into a mountain of cocaine. That's Star Wars, baby, that's our 2017, you gotta zag on it. And this is me not refuting any one point or feeling you may harbor about this film. I am not here to take anything away from you. My only intention was to try to offer some additional context to this entity known as Star Wars, because sometimes I think we might expect things from it that it was never really trying to do. At the end of the day, it's a fun Flash Gordon riff that a gigantically unstoppable conglomerate purchased for $4 billion from a battle-worn badass who went through some pretty heavy criticism when the prequels came out. From everyone, including me. I'm sorry, George. Don't think of this as a 9-movie series. Think of it like a trilogy of trilogies, each one telling one continuous story, but in wildly different tones, which, whether on purpose or not, happen to represent 3 distinct decades of filmmaking, which I think is neat, if accidental, which is the way that I see Star Wars now. And that's because I looked at how so many other people see it. And if Empire taught us anything, it's that you should really wait for the context of the 3rd film, because it just might change your mind on the 2nd one. Hey everybody, welcome to the end of the episode. That was a hard one. That one took me about 6 weeks. At first it was just gathering folders and folders of what people thought about Star Wars at the time. Obviously big shout out to my Patreons like Sam Bacon, Lee Dome, Iris, Fox, Ryan Schaefer, Glenn White, Sandy Lester, Lil V. Lil V is also my favorite rapper. Big ups to Lil V. Please like and subscribe to this channel. Please like this video. Don't like the channel. I don't think that's the thing. Man, it's super fun doing this, and I want to keep doing this. The next video was going to be about Thor Ragnarok and how to make a perfect reboot. I sort of misscheduled in my sort of year-long schedule of movies of Mikey. I perhaps did not look at the Blu-ray release date, and I scheduled for the episode to come out literally the day after the video comes out. Just not super conducive to editing a video and retaining one's sanity. Talk about sane people like Caitlin Vidal, Douglas Doucette, the Criterion Correction Podcast, Benedict the Mad. Oh, I love my patrons. They're so nice. Yeah, I just kind of have to fill space here now. It's not my strong suit. Vitamin G is also a good rapper name. You and Lil V should make a vitamin supergroup. Yo, what's up? It's riboflavin. I used all my A material in the episode, so now we're just kind of stuck here in this awkward draw. Thanks to Matt Charles, Aaron DeBerry, Brady Altop, Justin Holt, Girish Menon, Joseph Cabo? Or Cabo, whatever. I don't know, like a butt or something. A name that will go down in patron history. Like, I need to make a plaque for, I don't know, like a butt or something. You have stuck to the joke. I do not know who you are. You have anonymously supported me for so many months. So thank you. I don't know, like a butt or something. And of course, Walrus, James Maston, Joe Shipley, Mark C. Warner, Axel Lehman, Kevin Hochter, Chris Matson, Garrett Lathy, Cyclops Boy, another rap supergroup, Stephen Morton, Jason M. Klug, Jacob Koziel, Map, and Tim Gordon. Of course, I will see you in 2 weeks with a new episode. Tell everyone you know!